Adonai Sfasa Siftach Ufi Yagi Telosechem Lasos Nachas Ruch Yotzreinu. So B'siyata Dishmaya, it's once again Monday night, and we have the incredible privilege of hearing from someone who truly needs no introduction, but I'll give it to anyway, just for those who may be listening at another time and may not be so used to or so fond or even so knowledgeable in the music and life of Rabbi Abie Rotenberg. Rabbi Rotenberg is arguably the greatest living composer of Jewish music. He's been producing music since 1972 with a style which has been described as soft and sweet. Abie Rotenberg published his first novel, The Season of Pepsi Myers, set 25 years in the future. The novel's plot centers around a promising young Jewish baseball player who discovers the beauty of Torah Judaism midway through his stellar rookie season. It's really an honor and privilege to have Rabbi Rotenberg here with us tonight, and he'll be joining the Zoom in just another moment. Welcome, Rabbi Rotenberg. It's really an honor and privilege to have you here tonight, and I don't know if you want to say a few words or we can just jump into some questions, whatever you're more comfortable with. I think we're a little frozen, so we'll just give it another minute because Baruch Hashem, we've got some great things happening right now. Rabbi Rotenberg,
can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
Privilege to have you with us today. I don't know if you've heard before, but we can
How you doing?
questions, or you can speak for a few minutes, whatever you feel more comfortable with.
Sure. So first of all, tell me about yourselves. I mean, you guys are chat boys, or what grade are you in? Like, I'd like to know a little bit about what level I'm talking to, or
so the general group is usually Chad and Archaim guys. Just looking at the people who are on now, that's not the case tonight, but there is a fairly large WhatsApp group, and the recording will be available to those people on that group as well. And they're sort of a mix, people from Chat, Archaim Alpana, from not in Canada as well. So really it's a great mix of people. Yeah.
Very nice. So really, I don't mind. We can have an open forum.
Okay.
We can talk about anything you guys would like to talk about.
Okay.
Really don't, I like to shoot from the hip. I don't know what I'm talking about at the time, but
okay,
but I'll try my best.
I got a few questions in already, and just before we start, any inspiration that comes from tonight should be as close for Shlema, for Shlomo Noach HaKohen Ben Fega, Bracha and Rivka Bas Leah B'soch Shar Chole Yisrael.
Amen.
And now, with that being said, let's go to.
Do you know anything about Shlomo Noach HaKohen? Do you know anything about him? He is a wonderful. He's the man who founded the Jewish education program, Ar Sameach, here in Toronto. So if you pass by the Ar Sameach building on Bathurst, and that's his institution, and he's done a tremendous amount of outreach in Russia and big Talmud Chacham. Anyway, let's hope.
The person that sent me actually just joined, and Base just sent me the name Baruch Hashem. Now I know who it is. Again, it should be as close for him and for all those who are needing a complete healing.
Amen.
So let's jump right in. I got a few questions before this evening. Let's start with something that happened sort of about a year ago now. And at the beginning of the pandemic, you and Rav Baruch Levine wrote and performed The Place Where We Belong, which of course is based on your classic The Place Where I Belong, a beautiful song about a Sefer Torah, which written in 1842 then gets taken away amidst the chaos and terror of the Shoah. So how exactly did the idea to do this COVID version, and what's been your main takeaway from the period where we were kept away from our Sefer Torah, this time for our own good?
I'm old enough and smart enough not to give reasons or try to understand the ways of God. I mean, they're so complex and deep, and certainly not while it's happening or right around the time it's happening. I remember when Nachum Siegel asked me about a week after 9/11, well, Abie, when are you going to write a song about 9/11? I was just absorbing what happened and trying to get a grip on it. And I don't know what to say about COVID. I have no clue what Hashem's plan is. I just know that we certainly have been humbled by it all. We see how insignificant we are. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, waves a finger, so to speak, and the whole world gets turned upside down. Reminiscent of Migdal Bavel, snapped a finger and all of a sudden the people couldn't communicate with each other. So we realize how insignificant we are in the scheme of things, which if you study the Sefer Eov, which is a very difficult Sefer, one of the Sifrei Tanakh, which is very, very difficult to study and to understand. The Hebrew is very, very cryptic and difficult. But if the basic theme of that book is that Eov questioned why he was suffering because he was such a righteous man and he knew that he hadn't sinned. And he wondered why he was suffering. And all his friends said, well, you must have done this wrong. You must have done that wrong. And he said, no, I know I didn't. I've been pure. I've been straight. And I'm suffering anyway. And I can't understand God. And then finally, in the end of the Sefer, God comes to him and says, well, where were you when I created the world? And how much do you know about this? And how much do you know about that? We're so insignificant in relationship to his greatness and his awesomeness. He's an awesome God. That's the only thing I take away from it, is that, again, we've been reminded, unfortunately, again of how small we are. But thankfully, very often the Jewish people are reminded in a much harsher way, in a much worse way throughout history. And this has been relatively mild. It's affected the whole world, not just the Jewish community or the Jewish people. So it's an interesting phenomenon, 100%. But I don't know if you heard this background story to the original place where I belong, and that I'm happy to share with you. That story, how I wrote that song. And then we'll go from there to the place where we belong, or that I wrote with Baruch. So I was a teacher for many years in Los Angeles, and I was doing some research on the Holocaust, and I heard that the Hebrew Union College, which is the Reform college, Reform Judaism's college in Los Angeles, had a slide library. This is back in the day before phones, cell phones, and even video was just starting with the heavy handheld cameras before the small pocket ones. So we used to do presentations, slide presentations. So we were doing a show about the courage. It was called The Courage of Faith. The idea was not to approach the Holocaust from the perspective of the courageous people of the Warsaw Ghetto, and they certainly were very courageous to stand up and face the Germans and rebel and stand up to them, or those that hid in the forests and took up guns. Our theme was the courage of faith, how much courage and strength of character it took for people to remain believers, to stand up for their history and for the memories that they remembered from their parents, and the courage of faith within the Holocaust. Anyway, so I went to their slide library. They were very gracious. They said I could borrow any slides that I wanted to, but there weren't enough there for my project. So I went to the library with a camera and I started researching in books to take pictures out of the books with the camera. And it was a large English Judaica library. And I went to yeshiva as a kid. So, you go to yeshiva, in the back of the Beis Medrash, it's filled with Sfarim and Shas and Rishonim and Achronim and all the Sfarim, and each Sefer is used. And sometimes there's only one or two of the same Sefer, and guys are trying to grab it away from each other. And it's these old ancient tomes in Hebrew. And in that library, all the books were in English, except there was a Shas, a beautiful old Shas, but it was under lock and key in a case of glass. And it hurt me very much, because here I'm looking at all these students, and they're studying this one and that one and the philosophy of this and the history of that and whatever it is, that all this English Judaic are really not related to Torah Judaism, but the philosophy of Judaism. And it hurt me very much to see a Shas under glass as a relic, a artifact, seemingly, look but don't touch. That's something old from the ancient world. It has nothing to do with modern America and modern Los Angeles. And I came home that night and I started thinking about that idea. It percolated, and I said, why write a song about a Shas? Let's write a song about the Torah itself and how the Torah itself could be taken and put in a museum and put behind glass. And then I started thinking about how the Torah would feel and the emotions that it would have, whereas it was used every day in shul, or 3 times a week they would read from it and open it and learn from it, and how it would rejoice in being a needed, necessary component of Jewish life, and then how it would feel if it's sitting alone under glass. So that's how that story came about. And it's a long song, it's about 7 minutes, and I was able to write that from start to finish that same night. And many songs that I've written have taken years to write. That one went one night and done. And then during the pandemic, Baruch Levine reached out to me and he said, well, why don't we do the opposite, about how the Sefer Torah is now in a shul, but it's sitting there lonely, all alone. The lights are off. Nobody's coming to visit. Nobody's coming to see it. So we did that little Zoom song, and thankfully it was well received and hopefully gave people some encouragement. Anyway, that's the background of that song. Not every song has such a great story, but that one is a true story. And since that day, that song's been sung many, many times at many, Hachnasat Sifrei Torah all around the world. And hopefully it's inspired people to reevaluate and reflect on bringing Torah from the corner or from behind a glass and bring it into their lives.
Absolutely. And I know just for me personally, and I know this is what you said, what you were teaching about, but sort of faith throughout the Holocaust has been something that really struck the chord with me, whether it's the books of Rabbi Yisrael Meir Lau Shlita, or Rabbi Ephraim Oshri, Zecher Tzadik Kadosh Livracha, or Rav Klomas Kalman Shapira, the Eish Kodesh, Hashem Yikam Damo. Some of the most powerful Torahs are the Torahs
Imagine the story of the man who was he was going to live. He was a good worker, so he was destined to go to the working line and continue living. But he had a son. He had a son who was taken and designated to go to the line where he would be killed. But one of the commandants, or one of the soldiers, went over to him and whispered to him that if he got him so much money or some whatever it was, some chocolate, some cigarettes, a watch, who knows what, I don't remember exactly what it was, he would take his child off the line and return his child to him. So he asked the soldier, this is an Erlich Yid, a true Jew, he asked the soldier, and if you return my son to me, what will you do? He says, well, then I'll take another Jewish boy to take your son's place. So he went. I don't even remember what Rav Oshri answered him. I don't remember the answer, but it's in that Shilas and Shuvas. I don't remember the name of the sefer. Mimamakim, Shilas and Shuvas Mimamakim. That was one of the Shilas asked him. Would he be allowed to pay off this guard to save his own son? And if he knew that somebody else was taking his place, is it Mipsar Chal Tisalem? Is it Lo Samad Al Damreyecha? Is it? I don't remember the answer, but just the fact that he asked the question, the courage of faith, the courage to do the right thing. And the reason that Jews have done the right thing is because they subscribe to a higher power and a higher purpose in life. And it's not just everything that goes on in this world. It's what will we say when we get to the next one and face our Creator, and how are we going to do that if we're not true to ourselves here? And that's, if I was going to talk about something, I was going to talk a little bit about Pesach. So Pesach is like, what is the most important or significant Jewish holiday throughout the year? So I know many people would answer and say Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur, the synagogues, whether it's Orthodox, Reform, Conservative, whoever goes to shul is going to go on Yom Kippur. It's probably the most significant holiday, but I don't think so. I think Pesach is the most significant holiday in the Jewish calendar. I think it's what's held us together all these years. And the genius of how it's presented in the Torah, it's unbelievable. Have to remember Yetzias Mitzrayim every day. It's not something you only do on Pesach. It's not, you don't sit down once a year and think about Yetzias Mitzrayim. You put on your tefillin, the tefillin have Yetzias Mitzrayim, and you kiss a mezuzah. Mezuzah every Shabbos, you say Zeichel Yetzias Mitzrayim in Kiddush. Every other Yom Tiv, Shavuos, Sukkot, they are all Zeichel Yetzias Mitzrayim. But in addition to the den, twice a day in Kriya Shema, you say, Asher say, that is to remember the Exodus. But on the day itself, or the week itself of Passover, I mean, we do so much. We clean our houses, we eat matzah, we get rid of all chametz. We have a seder where we sit for hours and talk about all the details of Yetzias Mitzrayim. So it's really all year round on a superficial level, and then a very intense a week. And of course, the highlight is the Seder, and Gol is the two Siddur. And the Ramban asks why. I mean, why is Zeichel Yetzias Mitzrayim seemingly the most important zikaron that we have in our Torah? So many mitzvahs are connected to Zeichel Yetzias Mitzrayim. And he writes that it is the foundation of Hashgacha Pratis. It's the foundation of, yes, God created the world. And it's easy to say God created the world. And when you hear about creationists and intelligent design out in the world, out in the natural world, in the greater world, it's not that difficult for people to believe that God created the world, that there's a higher power, a superpower, a supreme being who created the world. It certainly makes at least as much sense as it just starting from nothing. Probably makes a lot more sense than that. But who says that God didn't create this world, give it a spin, put in the foundations of nature, and then go off to make another world somewhere else, and, another galaxy? 200 billion light years away from here, he's doing the same, and another 100 billion light years away from sun. He's busy making worlds all over the universe. But he gave it a spin, and now it runs on its own. Maybe every once in a while it comes back to take a look, see how things are going with his creations. But that he's involved with every single human being and every single soul and every single neshama that is created on this earth. The Ramban says, who says that's true? And there were Greek philosophers who believed that. They believed in God. They believed in a supreme being. But he's disinterested. He has no care. He's not. So that a power, a supreme power, would care about what's going on earth and take a nation that was enslaved by another nation and take them out. And how did he take them out? So he sent the plague of blood. But who got the blood? Well, if you were drinking from the river and you were Jewish, it was water. But if you were drinking from the river and you were an Egyptian, it was blood. So he was splitting the molecules based on who you were, what your ancestry was. If you came from the house of Jacob and you were descendant to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, it was H2O without whatever blood comes from. I don't know. And if an Egyptian and a Jew were drinking from the same cup with two straws, the Jew was drinking water and the Egyptian was drinking blood. And the Tzfardeim, these are these creatures and creations of the world that you think follow nature. Well, the frogs knew to go there to the Egyptian side and stay away from here, and so on and so forth. And the ultimate, of course, Makas Bechoros at the end. And then when they crossed the river, just when the Jews got to the Yam Suf, it split. It is a display, a powerful, mighty display of he's there, he cares, he distinguishes between every single human being on earth. And that's why it's even more of an obligation to remember Yetzias Mitzrayim, even more than remembering that he gave us the Torah. Although, by the way, on the commandments, on the luchos themselves, it says, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am Hashem your God. And how do I identify myself? How do I identify myself as God? Asher Hotzei Sicha Me'eretz Mitzrayim. You want to know which God I am, who I am? I'm the one who knew exactly what was going on with each and every single one of you. And that is why throughout the year we have this obligation to remember it. And certainly on Pesach, we have to delve into it and study it and make as if we were there. Why do we have to feel like we were there? So we can feel that presence of God, and we can feel that we understand and believe that we have this special creator who is deeply involved in our daily lives and wants us to succeed and wants us to do the right thing. So that's the deeper message of Pesach. Any questions?
Absolutely. And I think that in terms of Pesach and in terms of that message of Hashgacha, I've heard a lot of talks and a lot of speeches and a lot of great explanations for that idea of Hashgacha Pratis, of divine providence, but nothing has quite as stood out to me, and something I go back to over and over again as your song, The Atheist Convention in LA. And that's really, I was on the playlist I shared a little bit earlier and with the group as well. But that's really the argument in entertaining form for what we believe and why we believe it.
It's true. Every human being has a chelik elokam yimal, another song of mine, a small piece of heaven, right? So a small little neshama, and that neshama, it can be buried very, very deeply. It can be so faint, but it's there. And it's not just the Jewish people who have it. I mean, we maybe have a certain special ability, or we were given a God-given sense of right and wrong, and maybe by Shanim, Rahmanim, we have a certain sense of humility, and we care for other people. I mean, this has been borne out by Jewish history and Jewish people's contribution to the world. But every single soul needs something spiritual. It needs it. I recently learned a very interesting thing. You know, there's this famous Arizal, and he said, Matzah reminds us that we went out very quickly. We didn't just leave Mitzrayim. It wasn't like we had a schedule. We didn't have, a train ticket that we have to catch the next morning. We were going to catch the 8 a.m., the 8 a.m. train out of Egypt. We had to leave quickly. They didn't have time to bake bread. They didn't have, everything was b'chipazon. So the famous Arizal is that they were so down and low in terms of having been in Egypt for so many years, and they took on so many of the local customs, and they were so distant from God. And even though they saw miracles, they were still so entrenched in Egyptian culture. Had they stayed any longer, you all have probably heard this, had they stayed even one more day, they would have gone into this level called the 50th level of Tumah, the 50th level of defilement, and you can't get out of that. That's like a trap, and it's impossible to get out. But I recently saw Chassam Sofer says that he does a drush on the words Umi Matar Eschem. Rabbi Akiva said Mi Matar Eschem. Mi is Mem is 40, Yud is 10. That Hashem will take a person out even from me, even from 50. Mi Matar Eschem Hashem. Up until 49, you can probably do it yourself. But when you get to 50, you need God to do it. So it's a question. He's arguing on the Arizal. The Arizal says that you can't get out of 50, and that's why they had to get out so fast. Chassam Sofer says, no, God will still pull you out even when you hit 50. So I thought the answer was very simply. The Arizal is talking about before they got the Torah, before the Jewish people received the Torah on Har Sinai. They were in Mitzrayim. But when we stood at Har Sinai and promised to be faithful, and we accepted it upon ourselves, we got a little special extra dispensation from God. And we were so beloved to him for doing that, he's going to pull us out from anywhere. And we should never give up hope. And we should always, no matter who the Jew is, no matter who the person is, we see somebody who is down and out and distant, you never know. You never know what will affect them and attract them and hit the spot and pull them up and get them going. And Pesach is a wonderful time for that, So if you have a chance to, well, I don't know, COVID, I guess, really puts a dent into having people over, and especially, not family, but next year maybe, we'll still be around.
Absolutely. Last week we got to hear from Rabbi Josh Brody, who's the outreach rabbi in Boca Raton, Florida, and he gave a great talk on what exactly Avos Yisrael means and what we should be doing or what we shouldn't be doing, and that was really special. And I just back to the Torah you shared about the fact that it was the Torah itself that, because we now have the Torah, we therefore can get out even from the 50th level of impurity and beyond. That's brought down in the Or Chaim HaKadosh. Reb Chaim Ibn Attar says that explicitly. And it's really a beautiful idea, as you said, that even before we had the Torah, maybe we weren't as great, or maybe we couldn't have gone out. But now that we have the Torah, now that we have this connection to the Torah, to God, to the Jewish people, even if we're in the lowest of the low, there's always a way out. There's always a chance out. So that's a beautiful idea.
If I can interrupt you guys for a second. So Kyle, what do you do? You're in school now still? Do you go to school now, or everything's Zoom, or how does it work?
Little bit of both.
So you actually go to class. And what are you graduating this year?
Yeah.
So what are your plans? Like, where are you going next year? And
my plan, God willing, is to be at Torah in the Gesher Post High School program in Jerusalem, and then at YU.
And some of the other people here, I see Yona. You can unmute.
Yona is the Bnei
Akiva. Kyle's great. I come on to all his.
Yes, Yona is the Bnei Akiva Shaliach, and he is him and Bnei Akiva Toronto are the gracious hosts of.
I hope to go back to Israel next year with everyone. We'll take you with us.
We should all be zochet to go back to Israel. And if anybody's on this program listening and wonders what to do the year after they graduate high school, take a year off. Go to see your homeland and your people and see how they live. And it would be a really, really a big shame to not to take that opportunity, because who knows where life is going to lead you later on. If you can do it, beg, borrow, steal, I'll lend you the money. Go to Israel. It's unbelievable. Yeah, Abie.
Yeah, I went for 2 years actually. It was just you took the words from me. I was about to say that. Yeah, it's a big bracha. I went 2 years ago before almost. And I went I went to Levi Torah for 2 years. Yona also went to Levi Torah.
Very nice.
In Beit Shemesh.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so
when I was teaching in Los Angeles, so that was one of the things we tried to do with our students, was to get them to go. We even fast tracked them in high school so they could really graduate in January of their senior year, so that the last half of the senior year they could go to Israel. And this way the parents really couldn't say anything, because they were still seniors, but we fast tracked their graduation and their diplomas and their English requirements, and we sent them to Israel. So because you can live your whole life in some corner of the Galut and never see what a real Jewish life is, what it's like to have a neighborhood cordoned off for Shabbat, what it's like to go to the Kotel and see tens of thousands of people putting on tefillin and davening. So they live in these little pockets of the Galut where they have, maybe there's a temple or a synagogue, and they get, so it's like, it's like Judaism becomes like a 1/10 of 1% of what's important to them in life. And they think that if they do anything different, they're weird because nobody else is doing it around them. So they need to be in this environment where you see that this is a legitimate, meaningful, a practical way of living that is practiced by thousands and thousands of people. And I don't think there's anything more powerful. You can give 1,000 speeches and say 1,000 divrei Torah and show the most beautiful, aspects of the Torah itself, but nothing is more powerful than getting them there, getting them to Israel and doing that. So if you have opportunities in your life to do that with other people and to direct them there, you can You can do a lot of great things.
Absolutely, as the Gemara teaches us, Avir De'eretz Machkim, that there's really a special, there's a life force, there's an energy, there's a vitality that only comes with being in Eretz Yisrael. And until we get there, I really feel like I could just be calling out a song title for everything that you're saying right now.
Avira da
I believe-
Aramachkim, Kyle, Avira da Aramachkim is something supernatural. We don't understand it. No scientist could quantify it. You can't put it in a bottle. Avira da Aramachim, I have no idea why Avira da Aramachim. We have a promise in the Gemara that Avira da Aramachim, but even without miracles and even without supernatural metaphysical things that we don't have any idea, sending somebody to Israel, how many people walked up to Rabbi Schuster at the Kotel, and he got, and that was why today they have children studying Torah, grandchildren studying Torah, keeping the Torah. I mean, because they were in Israel. They saw that it was real. They saw that, wait a second, it's not just a story. I remember reading an article many, many years ago in the Jewish Observer, how in the conservative and reform circles, whenever they portrayed Orthodox Jews, they portrayed a guy with a long beard and payas. Why? Why did they do that? Because they wanted to show that in order to follow the Torah and to keep Shabbos and to do the mitzvahs and to sit in a sukkah and have 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, not just one, right? You had to be a radical. You had to look like a European Jew they didn't want to show a modern Orthodox doctor, right? Who's articulate and went to school, but also, or somebody who's a lawyer but does daf yomi every day. They wouldn't want to show that. That would be too threatening to them, right? To show that we have modern, functional, very, very successful lives that are very much in tune with the times, yet deeply rooted and founded in Torah and Yiddishkeit. That would be threatening to them. So that's why they want to portray us as being these, radical, ultra, this and that. So go to Israel, you see normal people, everyday people. Faith is an important part of their lives, and that's fantastic. If you can get
just on that point you were saying about different people and everyone being themselves in Yerushalayim and in Israel and different. I was just before I came to Israel in August during the pandemic. So the Kotel Plaza was completely empty. There was no one there. And the day they let us out of our house, I lived walking distance. So I went there and it was pouring. And I was only there. And then that Shabbos, the whole place was empty. And someone came from Tel Aviv, I guess. I don't know. They must have, it seemed to me they came from very far. Presumably they drove there and they came to the Kotel. It was just me and them. And the man takes his son to the wall and he's like looking there and he's like, how do I explain to him, the Kotel in one sentence, and he says, yeah, this is a really, really old wall. And I was like, no, we have to give him more than that. And I was just standing there and I go to him and I open up the Aron Kodesh and I didn't know what I was going to say. Mm-hmm. And it just came out to me and I said to him, look at the Sifrei Torah. And I asked him if he could tell the differences between the two. The Sifrei Torah, there was the Ashkenazi ones, which look plain, and then you have the Sephardi ones, which are all silver on the outside. And then I said to him, inside, they're the same exact thing. And I said, that's Am Yisrael. And the father looked at me, he was so happy, and then he walked away. It's that one place where, like, everything, like you were just saying, everyone you can be yourself. It's like...
the story the Gemara tells about Yossi Mishisa, who was an informant. He was a traitor to the Jewish people. He informed on Jews. He told the Romans where Jews were when it was in the days of Shmad, when you couldn't practice Jewish religion, and they plundered the Beis Hamikdash, and they told him to go out and bring out the Kalim, and he goes in, he brings out the menorah, and they told him that he could have whatever he wants, and he takes out the menorah, and then they said, well, no, not that, and it hit him like a flash of lightning. How treacherous they are, how they're liars, and all of a sudden his whole life changed in a second. He was a traitor, and he refused to listen to them. They killed him, and he died al Kiddush Hashem. A Jew it can happen in a second. It can happen in a second, and we never know when that second is going to be. And sometimes it could be a shuv sha'achas lifnei misascha, before you die, but. The Pintele Yid is burning in everybody somehow. So let's see what we can do to light it up. The atheist can, a song here, a song there can help. I'm never, what's the word? I never brag and say that I change anybody with a song, but maybe make them think a little bit, then they change on their own. When I was younger and my children were still running around the house making trouble, so I wrote this series called The Marvelous Midos Machine. I'm not sure how familiar the Chevra are with that, but it's a bunch of children's tapes. Yeah. So Moshe, yes, Olav Shalom and I, we wrote the first tape, and when we finished it, we did it in his basement, and we called over two of his sons. I think one of them today is Tali, famous musician, and Tali was the oldest, I think, and then the next one, maybe Tali was 7 years old, the brother was 6 or 5. We told them to sit on the couch and listen to the tape from the beginning to the end, and they were sitting there, and their eyes were wide open, and they were hearing the whole thing with the satellite and the Kfitzas Derech machine and this and that and Dr. Doomstein and the songs. But after 40 minutes, they started to get a little impatient, as 6, 7-year-old kids would, and they started fighting with each other on the couch just while the song "Shalom is peace and Shalom's the way" is playing in the background. So we learned right away, don't get carried away. We're not going to really change people that much, but maybe educate them a bit. A little chinuch hamidos or chinuch hamitzvos, and there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, Trevor, what else? Any questions on any
we have a few. We have
Sure.
a few other questions that were sent in. Let's try to do them sort of rapid fire if possible. I know that I got this book, Season of Pepsi Myers. Really, I got it at least, I think, through NCSY a number of years ago. Really enjoyed it. I think this is I can say the only novel that has radically changed my outlook on life. I think that's safe to say. There you go. We can both hold up the copies. If anyone doesn't have it, I believe it's available on Amazon. Really a remarkable book. And so the question is, first of all, what's the story behind it?
And you don't have to be a Yankee fan to enjoy it, but it helps. It certainly helps. Anyway.
Of course.
Yeah, what was the story?
What's the story behind it, and who was really the target audience? Because it's not necessarily a Kiruv book or a Kiruv tool, but it definitely turned into that, or it definitely at least was being shared and supported by many different outreach organizations.
Yeah, thank you. Hold on one second. So I was working on a Torah book back in 2000 and I think 2000 and actually I started around 2012. So I'm here in Toronto. I'm a businessman. I have a family business that I've been working at, and music was always a hobby for me. I squeezed in as much as I could over the years, writing songs and coming up with ideas, but it was never an occupation. I never made a living from music. I mean, we made a few dollars over the years, selling songs and the CDs, but it was never my parnasa. But I decided to, there was a theme that fascinated me, and the theme was the life and the lessons and the mysterious personality of Eliyahu Hanavi. And I started working on that book, on collecting and writing a sefer on Eliyahu Hanavi in the year, I'm not sure, maybe 2005, 2006. And about 7 or 8 years into the project, I came up with the idea for Pepsi Myers. I was walking to shul one day, and it hit me like a bolt of lightning that why don't I write a book about a guy who's a great ball player, absolutely the best, and he comes to New York and he discovers Yiddishkeit. And the challenge, of course, is, what do? Do you pursue your very, very lucrative baseball career, or do you follow does Yiddishkeit take over your heart and your mind, and does it attract you? I even came up with the name on that walk to shul. I don't know why it popped into my head. Maybe I saw a Pepsi can on the road. I don't know, but the name, I said, I'm going to call this kid Pepsi Myers. And then I stopped. So this is the sefer I wrote on Eliyahu Hanavi. which is an art scroll book, but this is Torah. This is all about the Nevi'im and the Psukim and Eliyahu Novi after he was taken up to Shamayim, and Eliyahu on the Seder night, and Eliyahu on Matzah Shabbos, and Eliyahu whether or not we're going to turn to him for Psak Halacha after Mashiach comes. I mean, the fascinating. There's no Navi as fascinating as Eliyahu. He's still alive. He still exists. I mean, if you think about Eliyahu and what he went through with Har Carmel and reviving a child after he was dead, I mean, his life was just fascinating. And I thought it would be a great subject for a book. And Baruch Hashem, but when I was in the middle of that book, and I maybe had another year or two to go, I stopped and I took a year off to write this. And I felt this was, okay, so somebody gets a good vart on Eliyahu Navi from my Sefer. Somebody learns a little Torah from my book, from my Sefer Eliyahu Navi, very nice. If he's not going to learn that, I'll learn something else. The Eliyahu Navi book is not a Kiruv book, but this is a book that somebody possibly might read somewhere, maybe a Chabad house will have it sitting in the, the waiting room, or some dentist will have it, who knows? And somebody will read it or buy it and reevaluate a little bit. And I stopped what I was doing. I took a year off to write Pepsi Myers and publish it. And I don't regret doing that. And I have no idea, it's not like I get email testimonials. I do know we sold quite a few books, Baruch Hashem, and we still sell a little bit on Amazon here and there, and Feldheim sells it a little bit, but I felt that was more important. So Hashem sent me an idea, and I was able to incorporate the basics of Yiddishkeit. It's very simple. Look, the idea was very simple. Rav Hirsch wrote a book for young people about Yiddishkeit. It's called The 19 Letters. I don't know if any of you heard of it or read it. It's hard to read. I read it as when I was young, as a teenager. Found it very difficult to read. And I certainly couldn't take that book today to my neighbor down the block who doesn't know the first thing about Yiddishkeit and say, here, why don't you read Rabbi Hirsch's 19 Letters? It's so hard. It's so difficult. And it's all about Yiddishkeit. I said, today, where we are in the Golas, let the story be 80% about baseball, and we'll squeeze a little Yiddishkeit in, in between the innings, Yeah, and the commercials are the Yiddishkeit. But that's the only way to reach these kids today, and at least let them know a little bit what's out there. And when they come across it, they'll have some memory of what it's supposed to be like. And anyway, that was my thought process. And if you meet people in your life and you're able to, direct them to the book, I would appreciate it. It's a schus for me, and it'd be a schus for you as well.
Absolutely, and I will definitely send out the link to the book as well after.
You just reinforced.
I could tell you guys because I'm on. You go ahead, Yona.
No, I was just going to say you reinforced my biggest about COVID, and that's that we all miss out on the walk to shul. Perhaps more than shul itself, the walk to shul and the ideas we get on the way.
There you go. I am working on a 5th Journeys album now. So Mirz Hashem, hopefully this year. And I think we finally have enough songs. It's been over 15 years since the last one, since Journeys 4. So Mirz Hashem.
So everyone get your Kleenex ready is what I'm hearing.
There you go. At least one or two really, or maybe 2 or 3 really, good tear jerkers, and nothing like a good cry.
Absolutely. We have
the
a few more questions.
Never close. They never close for tears. They never close. So why are there gates? You ever ask yourself that question? If the gates of heaven never close for tears, Share Demos, the gates of heaven, the gates of tears never close. So if they never close, what do you need gates for? Why don't you just have an open arch, an archway, right? Any ideas? So I once heard a rabbi explain. He said, "Yep, they can even close for tears if they're false tears. So if you look like you're crying, like if you write in your siddur, here you have to cry. If it's not sincere, then the gates close. But real, sincere, honest, heartfelt tears, God will listen to them, and God cannot ignore them. He made the rules, and he has to follow by his own rules. And so if we get a few people to cry, that's not such a bad thing. It's not such a bad thing. Baruch Hashem.
Absolutely. We've got 2 or 3 more questions. I know that
Sure.
it's getting a little bit late, so
My
let's
pleasure.
try to keep going. Someone asked, what advice and encouragement would you give to a 16-year-old boy who wants to make a few songs of his own?
Okay, I would hope that we're talking about somebody who has a little bit of musical talent. Look, Baruch Hashem, I recognize and I thank Hashem all the time that he gave me the ability to have some understanding or feel for music. I have a daughter who's a wonderful artist. She paints beautiful pictures, portraits, and I cannot draw a straight line. I have absolutely no talent when it comes to drawing, perspective, and they mean nothing to me. I'm ha'aretz gomor. I am totally clueless when it comes to that aspect of art. But that person who can do it naturally and has this affinity and ability and a natural talent for it doesn't really understand, like, my ignorance. Like, why am I so thick-headed when it comes to drawing? And it's very hard for somebody who's musical to understand somebody who is clueless when it comes to music. Like some people are. You'll tell some people, what are the high notes? And they'll go low on the piano. And then they just don't have any idea of music and perspective and timing. It's something that doesn't work for them. But anybody who has some talent, who can sing, who can harmonize, play an instrument for sure, can probably also compose and can probably also put together some new, fresh, nice sequence of notes that would be interesting. And if it sounds similar to something that you've heard before, well, change it. If it sounds like somebody else's music, make some changes, make it an 8th note instead of a 16th note, and maybe change the note or change the rhythm. So if anybody has that basic talent and drive and desire to write a melody, I think they can, as long as they have some elementary talent. As far as writing lyrics, there's so many different kinds of lyricists and types of lyrics. Mine are probably more educational. It's not like I bare my soul or I talk about personal things. I try to find the theme. I try to find a message. I try to find a story that can be enlightening and thought-provoking. That's my approach to songwriting. Somebody else might want to bare his or her soul in what they write and write about personal things or about emotions, and they're all valid ways of expressing yourself. So lyrics, it's very, very hard to point to any one approach. But again, be true to yourself and also work hard at it. Don't think that, okay, I'm going to sit down for 5 minutes tonight and I'm going to have a song, I'm going to have lyrics, I'm going to have a symphonic arrangement. It doesn't work that way. Anything you want to do and succeed in, you have to put a lot of time and a lot of work, a lot of effort. Whatever I've been able to accomplish, I always say it's, been 95% perspiration and 5% inspiration. It's work and work and work. And then Hazorim Bedima Barina Yiksoru, you put in the tears and you plant the field with tears because it's backbreaking work. But then at the end of the day, you can reap the rewards of what you've planted. So that would be my advice.
Okay, and the next question that we have is that I know I've heard a lot of Rabbanim, Rabbeim, other musicians say that for inspiration, for comfort, when they want to feel a little bit, they turn to your music. Is there any singer, any musician that you particularly listen to, or someone that stands out to you as?
I'm a very big chassid of Shlomo Carlebach's songs, Shlomo Carlebach's music. I had the honor of meeting him a few times. I played music with him a few times in my life. I feel that Shlomo had a special, remember in the olden days, I don't know if they have it anymore, but I remember President Reagan, it was called the hotline. He had a red phone in his office that he could call the Kremlin in case there was something going on. in the Cold War, right? So that the two leaders with nuclear power could call each other and cool things down. I always felt that Shlomo had like a special hotline to Shamayim, you know, and every once in a while he'd pick it up and he'd hear a niggin that was going on upstairs and he would teach it to the rest of the world. You know, he had a special connection. I don't know of any one of his songs that I don't like. There are some that I like more than others, but I like them all. And, you know, when I sit down and do a kumsitz with friends or with chevra, it's always, you know, they'll sing a song or two of mine, but it'll invariably go to Shlomo most of the time. So, you know, he had a special connection to the Shar Hanagina, whatever that is. He certainly did. So he would be my go-to person for nigun.
Absolutely.
Can't go wrong. Can't go wrong.
A story actually that I just wanted to share because I felt it was really powerful, and I sort of want to hear it. And it brings out an important question that I want to get your take on as well. A group of guys from Yeshivat HaKotel, the brother of whom is actually on the call tonight, and he's walked in a couple of times. They recorded Haben Yakir Li, and they reached out to you to get permission to record the song. And your response to them was that apparently you laughed and said that, do you know how many people record my music without permission? And you said that because they asked for permission specifically, they should be matzliach. Obviously that happens a lot, but do you have you just like, is it, again, we have a few chassidim on the call, so yes, ancient yesh b'olam klal, but have you sort of just given up on the fact that your music is really the Jewish people's music, or is there some sense of frustration when you see people that don't even recognize that this is your original work?
Well, if they don't recognize it, then I'm mochel them. If they don't know that, you know, listen, I'm recording a song on this upcoming album that is an old Hasidic tune, and I adapted it. I changed the melody a little bit, and I wrote English words for it. And I researched to try to find out who the composer was. And just this past week, I found out his name. He's no longer alive. He passed away before the war, but I have his name and I can put his name down on the album, and I'm going to write, it's written by so-and-so, and it's been adapted by me, and there's nobody to give royalties to or to pay for it. It's an old bub of a march, but I know who wrote it. And on the first Vekas album, we had a song called Karibon Olam. It's not my song. And we wrote traditional, and we tried to find out who wrote it, but we don't know, and we could never find the name of the composer, so we wrote traditional. And maybe, you know, I'm pretty old. I've been around a long time, doing this a long time. There are people who are going to hear a song. You know, I could understand people hearing Achenu and thinking it's traditional, you know, that it's a traditional song from another generation, and they're not really wrong. You know, it's Baruch Hashem become a traditional song, and I'm from a previous generation, so I'm mochel them if that's the case. If they know that it's mine, and there are ways to properly fulfill their obligations based on royalty law and mechanical rights, you know, then I would hope that they want to do the right thing. You know, if they don't, I don't know if I'm going to say on this public forum that I'm mochel them, because I don't want them to hear that and use it, but that's another question. But certainly if they're not aware, I'm mochel them, you know.
Absolutely. And I know that for me, the two of the most powerful moments of my life have been singing Achenu one time at the Kotel on Tisha B'Av, as Tisha B'Av was ending at NCSY's Kumsitz of the World, and that was really an incredible experience. And the other was in October of 2017, I believe, November, the year of the Pittsburgh shooting, on an NCSY Shabbaton, and we heard about the shooting right after Shabbos ended. We said a few Kvittelach Tehillim after Mariv, and then everyone just sort of stood there for a second in silence, and then we just started singing Achenu again, and we didn't stop singing it that entire day. Steve Gar was there with us that Shabbos, the counterterrorism expert in Israel. He actually then got up and drove to Pittsburgh in the middle of the night to be there in Pittsburgh. It was an incredible Shabbat and an incredible experience. But that stuck out, just the fact that we were singing Achenu all through Shabbos. We didn't know what happened. And then the second Shabbos ended and we found out, there was no words, but we recognized that, as we spoke about even in our talk last week, that the Jewish people are intrinsically connected, and we just stood there singing Achenu for what felt like hours. It was an incredible experience.
It was written in Toronto, that song. So that was written after I moved here, yeah, from LA, about 5 years after I moved here. And we released it. It had mazel because we released the album about a month before the Gulf War, and everybody and Saddam Hussein was shooting these Scuds into Eretz Yisrael, and everybody had just heard the song Achenu, and then everybody was saying Achenu every day with Tehillim, and so the song had mazel. You know, it's a good song too. Don't get me wrong, I like it, and I think it was pretty good, but it also had mazel. And, you know, I have songs of mine that, you know, it astonished me that they became as popular as they did. And I have songs that I really, quite honestly, thought would do a lot better and didn't. But that's the way it goes. That's the way it is, you know.
Absolutely. I'm going to ask one more question, and then I'll just turn it over to you to wrap up because I know it's getting late.
Sure.
But I don't know if you saw David El-Zif, who's a great musician. He was...
What's his name? Say it again.
David El-Zif. He goes by David El, incredible musician. He's actually someone who, when I was really starting to look for more Jewish music, said, Abie Rotenberg, every single day, that's who you should be listening to. I was actually, it happened to be because they sang that on an Ensitzwa Kala, the Hine Keli Shuasi from Dveikus. I believe it's the second Dveikus album, I'm not sure. And I couldn't find the tune anywhere. So I reached out to him and he said, it's Abie Rotenberg's tune from Dveikus and you have to listen to every single song. And I think that night I listened to all three Journeys albums.
For the sake of Leman HaEmes, Hine Keli Shuasi was written by Baruch Chait. Rabbi Baruch Chait from the Rabbi's Sons, and it's his song. We recorded it, and you know, we publicized it. But listen, there have been most of the songs on Dveikus are mine. I think I wrote probably 70% of them, but there are quite a few songs that are Leif Tahar is not my song. Like I said, Kori Bon Olam. Quite a few songs are not mine, so you have to be careful. But I get the credit for it anyway, even though. Like the Sefer Torah song, the nigun, the tune itself is not mine. That tune is an old, I think it's an old Lithuanian nigun. But I knew that song growing up as a child. I heard Rav Shalom Shvadron, the Maggid of Yerushalayim. I heard him sing it, and I learned the song from him. And then when the idea of the Sefer Torah song came, I right away somehow locked in on that tune for those words. I don't even know why.
Absolutely. So as I was saying, Dovidel, who introduced me, basically, or reintroduced me to sort of all of your music, he sang last month, Tu B'Shvat actually, he sang at the Eish Kodesh, Fabregan and Yartzeit Hilula for Rav Moshe Weinberger's father, who was a Holocaust survivor, who, again, we're talking about faith in the Holocaust. He had tefillin, he kept his tefillin with him in Mauthausen and provided tefillin to thousands of Jews each morning throughout the war, and really an incredible person. And I've learned a lot from Rav Weinberger, and his son, Rav Mordechai, Rav Moshe Weinberger's son, said about his father that all of his father's shiurim is basically saying what his grandfather didn't in all his years of silence. And so to me, that, again, I'm very connected to Rav Weinberger. But anyways, back to the actual story. Davidel sang that nigun. He's saying memories from Journeys. And Rav Weinberger was in tears. Everyone at Eish Kodesh at the time, again, I'm sitting here in Toronto. I wasn't there, but I was watching in the live stream. Everyone was, it was arguably the most powerful moment I've seen in a long, long time. And it leads us to think again, yes, the faith, and yes, the stories, and yes, but now that we're coming to a generation where there aren't going to be Holocaust survivors around, that's where we need to be thinking, and we need to be thinking about what we can do to connect ourselves to God, to the Torah, to the Jewish people. And so I just want to share that, because I don't know if you've seen it. I am happy to send you the clip of that. And
No, I'm going to go look for it. Okay, yeah, if you could send me a link, that would be
yeah,
great.
that is, because that was a very powerful moment. And then
I
know it's getting late.
plan on, that's okay. I plan on having 3 songs. I want one song peripherally connected to the Holocaust, and 2 songs, one song about the Holocaust and one song about post-Holocaust. So on this upcoming album, because, you know, the Holocaust is really turning into, you know, a sort of ancient history for us. You know, children today, young children today, even their grandparents, you know, where if they have great grandparents, maybe they're children of Holocaust survivors today. It's, I mean, to be a Holocaust survivor, you have to be in your 80s today, just about, you know, if to have any memories of it, unless you were, you know, 5 years old at the time. I mean, it's just so long ago. So it, you know, you'd be, if you were born the day the Holocaust ended, you're 75 years old today, right? No, you're 55, right? 75 years old. So if somebody was a 5-year-old child, he'd be 80 years old today. You know, in our community, our shul was all Holocaust survivors, and there are none left. And there are just a few people who were very young at the time of the war, and they're the ones who are telling us about what happened, and their memories are spotty, and certainly, you know, memories of being children at the time, which is different than hearing it from an adult. So I feel a big achrayus is to keep that alive and keep that the memories there, and the thoughts of Klal Yisrael directed there. And there are tremendous lessons to learn, still tremendous lessons to learn from our recent history. But anyway, we should be thinking happy thoughts. You know, we go from Adar to Nisan to Chodesh HaGeula, and you know, Benisan and Asidim Ligoel. And who says this is not going to be the year? One of the pshatim in the Medrash for Leil Shimurim, a night of protection. So it should say Leil Shemira. It shouldn't say Leil Shimurim. Why is it plural? What is it, Leil Shimurim? So one of the answers given is that the night of Pesach, the night that we sit and have the first Seder, had more than one amazing redemption. It was the night when we got out of Mitzrayim. It was the night that the army of Sancherib died while it was circling Yerushalayim. It's the night that King Achashverosh couldn't sleep, and he asked for his people to read from the Megillah. It's a night where Daniel, I think, was in the lions. That was the night of Pesach. It's at the end of the Haggadah. There's a song we sing about on this night, Shimurim. It's a night of protections, not just a night of protection in the past. And the Medrash says it's going to be the night Mashiach comes. Special night, a night of protection, a night of redemption, a night of freedom. So let's hope it's this year. It's one of the reasons they give for Kos Shel Eliyahu, because Eliyahu Hanavi is going to come and tell you about the Geula, and he needs to drink too on the Seder night. So have a cup ready to give him so he could do the mitzvah of Dalet Kosos, right? That's one of the reasons given why we have a Kos Shel Eliyahu, because this is the night he's coming. Let's take a hope that it happens this year, this Nisan, all around the world.
Amen. Thank you,
Rabbi
Rotenberg, for being here
nice
today.
to meet you all.
Tonight. Thank you
all
for
of you
everyone for joining.
And you know, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely.
Nice to meet you all.
Thank
Call
you,
to
everyone. Have a good night.